Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Today I'm going to demonstrate how this high mileage newer BMW is dead reliable for me. So this is a 440i with the B58 engine. It's a Gen 1, the 6-port head. It's got 125,000 miles on it. And as you can see, it's averaging 25.2 miles per gallon mixed city and highway driving, and that's driving it hard, believe it or not. I'll cut over to the exhaust clip so you can see how it sounds, considering how sporty it can sound when you're in sport mode and how quiet and comfortable it can sound when you're driving normally. It's pretty awesome. Let's go for a drive and I'll give you some information about this Gen 1 B58 and the transmission and talk about what I've done to it and how well it's been holding up. So I got this car with 108,000 miles, and I specifically looked for a high mileage variant so I could make content on it because I had an N54, bought it with high mileage and just had tons of issues with it, documented all that, kind of built my channel on that. And then I figured let's get an N55. So highest mileage one I could find was 97,000 miles, and it had a whole bunch of issues. Not like the N54, but still there was issues, and I documented that. And then I picked up N20s just to show the issues and whatnot. And I figured, okay, well, if I get myself into a Gen 1 B58, I'd already had a Gen 2 B58 in my M340i, and I made a video demonstrating how, just by looking at it, kind of like with an engineer mindset, that the car looked like it was going to be very reliable. But a lot of people commented saying, well, we'll see how these things hold up. I picked this up to kind of build on that to see how it's going to hold up. I figured there'll be some things going wrong with it, but nothing like the N55 or N54. But really, this thing is just indestructible, bulletproof, runs like a Camry, gets crazy gas mileage. It's tuned with MHD Stage 2 Plus. It's got a downpipe and XHP Stage 3. So when you're driving this car normally, it just drives like a regular car, but it's nice. It feels like a 6 Series, not like a 328. Maybe that's a Grand Coupe thing, or because of the all-wheel drive or the weight of the car, but it just feels premium. It doesn't feel like an entry-level F30, even though it's related to that chassis. But when you're driving normally, with the valves closed and the exhaust and comfort, it's a perfect daily driver, especially with just the kind of numb electric power steering. Sometimes it's nice when you're just driving normally. But the Trans and Sport engine and Sport Plus, so you can get a feel for the sound of the engine. So this transmission in this car isn't as crisp as my M340i, but I've been told that they handle about another 150 wheel horsepower before you got to build them, because they're actually a little more lazy. They're a little stronger. Sound wise, you can't really tell them apart from a Supra or M340i and whatnot. Supposedly the Gen 1 B58 has a 6-port head, but with a smaller turbo. It hits harder, especially with this car being all-wheel drive. It hits harder when you leave the light, especially if you do like a 20 punch. It throws you back real hard. On the highway after 60, it's a little slower. It feels than like an M340i. The turbo can't keep up. It's great for fuel economy and daily driving ability, but it's got all the character you want. It's probably making like over 4-something crank. And you can push these to 500 crank horsepower all day long, be averaging over like 23, 24 miles a gallon, driving it really rough without worrying about reliability. The engine will hold up completely fine. As long as you're not trying to go for 600 plus wheel horsepower, you can just enjoy the crap out of the car. So I just wanted to demonstrate that. I actually got to the point where I started to drive this car even harder. I'm like, there's got to be something that comes up. The way I drive it, the way I use it, maybe an injector or even a spark plug or something, just considering. The car was first tuned about 18,000 miles ago. I got this car 18,000 miles ago. And before that, I looked at the service records. It was just oil changes and irregular brake flush and whatnot. Nothing fancy was done to it. It was literally just start it and go. But what I find uncanny is the fact that every time you start this car, literally every time you start it, doesn't matter the weather, doesn't matter what's going on, you never even get a little skip in the engine. You just get dead perfect driving every time. So you know how when you have a reliable car, you just know it's dependable, you just jump in and it never acts any different, it's never temperamental, it never skips a beat, it's just literally start it, sounds the same, runs the same, does what you want every single time you've started it. That's what this car's like, which is crazy for a tuned BMW. But it's kind of building on the point that I made in my previous video about how newer BMWs seem to be reliable, and how I talked about how my M340i had 0 issues from new. But even this, at 125,000 miles, is just rolling strong. So if you're thinking of moving on from the N54, you can't look at an N55 if you're trying to go for decent power. But if you liked running your Stage 2 Plus N54 with, you know, close to 400 wheel horsepower, 500 wheel max, and you want something new, you want to gain maybe 5 miles per gallon fuel economy, and you want it to sound good and feel good, there is this. It doesn't even have an oil leak, has no coolant leaks, doesn't have water pump issues because they went back to a conventional water pump. The AC compressor doesn't act up because it's just a regular clutch style. It's kind of like they realized that they maybe took it a little bit too far with the technologies on the earlier models and scaled it back and went for reliability. Maybe it was in preparation for the collaboration with Toyota. Kind of hard to say, but all I know is this thing is my most reliable car, and I trust it like crazy. It's 90 degrees out right now, so it's not going to pull as hard as it normally could, but I'll do a 20 punch just to give you an idea. This thing hits its hardest at a 20 roll. I'll show it right now. So when I bought this car, I bought it because I thought I'd be showing a bunch of known failure points, or at least try to research stuff that I could do ahead of the curve to have videos out before it's a known issue. And couldn't find anything, and nothing's happened. 125,000 miles, and everything's just perfect. So I think that demonstrates that, you know, something had to have been done in terms of the development to get this engine to be just a reliable workhorse that is happy with 500 horsepower, delivers over, you know, mid-20s miles per gallon, easily over 30 on the highway. Let's do some manual shifting. I don't have burbles on, it's just whatever the minimal amount is, but you'll still get some. Minor. Actually less than my M340i had from the factory. Alright, back in comfort mode. We'll go back to the shop and show you underneath the car and demonstrate how it's holding up in terms of oil leaks and condition and whatnot. And I'll talk about anything I've done, which is basically pretty much nothing, but there's a couple things to mention. So I'll catch up with you guys under the car on the hoist. All right, I'm going to bring you guys in and show you how the undercarriage is holding up. So I'm going to take out this under tray to show you guys how the bottom of the engine looks. As you can see, the under tray is completely dry. This car was originally from New York, but it came down south when it was about 2 or 3 years old. So overall, it's not very corroded. So I've had the car for a year. The only thing I had to do was change the rotors and change those thrust arms right there. Due to the car being all-wheel drive, these things tend to wear out a little bit sooner because when you hit, it hits pretty hard once you hit boost. There's that tray, completely bone dry. So like I said, this car's from up north, so you can see a little bit of corrosion, but there's 0 leaks. Looking in towards the transmission, completely dry. Looking at the pan, no signs of a leak at all, even after 125,000 miles. Back of the transmission, bone dry. Transfer case, bone dry. Moving toward the back, differential, all bone dry. Suspension looks good, no leaks, no issues. Current on the back. Just seems like there's a lot of effort put into making sure that this thing is as reliable as possible. The sealing methods are different, and it's just resulting in a car that does not degrade like I'm used to. For what it's worth, the suspension still looks really good. So here's a look under the hood. You probably saw the downpipe underneath. You have an intake right here, charge pipe upgrade, and a blow-off valve conversion, which really does nothing. It's just for sound. There's the B58. I did do the valve cover on this, valve cover gasket, and I did it just to make a DIY because I figured there's going to be a lot of people that are coming up on 100,000 miles and it would start to go. When I did it at 108 or 9,000 miles, it was perfect. It was still pliable. I didn't even need to do it. But I did it just to make a DIY. Otherwise, you know, I wouldn't even need to touch this. But it's completely dry around here. There's no oil filter housing leaks. There's literally nothing leaking on the engine after 125,000 miles. Original spark plugs, coils, and injectors, you name it, it's just being driven. I would say the reliability of this engine is pretty much a must. You know, all the known issues from the past had to be rectified. Otherwise, it would just be a nightmare to work on. There's the oil filter housing buried in the back. Right down there, there is a cooler that's normally up on the front on the older models. Because of the water to air intercooler setup, you'd have to take all that out just to do basic things like alternator and to get room to the AC compressor and other stuff like that. It's all just buried deep in there. If you had to do anything related to Vanel solenoids or timing chains and whatnot, it's all buried back in there. You'd have to pull the engine. I kind of feel like they were so confident in the design and reliability. Maybe feedback from Toyota or whatnot helped the cause, but I can tell you that it kind of had to be reliable. So when was the last time you could buy a BMW north of 100,000 miles and drive it really hard for a year and just put some rotors and control arm bushings in? So this has been my ownership experience after 1 year and about 20,000 miles on a Gen 1 B58 with over 100,000 miles on it. I thought that I'd be making a 1 year video saying that I didn't have to do maybe 50% of what I used to do on the older ones, or 75%, but it turned out to be just, it runs like a Camry, starts, drives like a new car, and it's been tuned and has 0 oil leaks and completely out of character for anything I've known BMW for, but I kind of had a hunch and I demonstrated it with this car. If you guys are interested in the first video where I literally show the parts differences and the evolution as they improve things between the N55, N54 and B58, check the description. It was a very popular video. I'll keep this car because it makes such a great daily driver and it's fun to drive and good on gas and all that. But if I was getting it for the YouTube channel to make DIYs and content to help people, there's nobody to help. So far they're just holding up. Really awesome, and maybe it'll encourage some of you guys that are being afraid to buy one of these cars to give it a shot. If you want an inline 6 that's turbocharged and you're happy with around 400 and some odd crank horsepower and you just want to beat on it, enjoy good fuel economy and good reliability, that's been my experience. Alright guys, that'll conclude this video showing you how reliable new B58s are. If this is the first video you're catching on mine, please consider subscribing. If you liked it, please give it a like so it'll rank higher. Thanks for watching.